I'm an alum. There's thousands of alums who have signed petitions saying, Harvard, stand up, follow the rule of law.
Overwhelmingly, us, the students, this is what we want to see from them. And, you know, they're not beholden to what we want, but it's really good to see that they are at least showing signs of resisting.
Hi again, everybody. It's 5 o'clock in New York. So far, the story of Trump 2.0 has largely been a story of obeying in advance and then in confrontation of capitulation. We saw it from law firms who gave in to the administration's demand, tech giants who stood behind Trump for the inauguration, corporations, even Columbia University. But now a striking departure. Harvard University saying it will not cave to orders from the Trump administration's long list of demands that includes removing all DEI programs, including in hiring and admissions, and auditing viewpoints of its student body. Harvard rejected the Trump administration's demands, saying, quote, the university will not surrender its independence or relinquish its constitutional rights. In a scathing letter, Harvard's president, Alan Garber, writes this, quote, the administration's prescription goes beyond the power of the federal government. It violates Harvard's First Amendment rights and exceeds the statutory limits of the government's authority under Title VI. And it threatens our values as a private institution devoted to the pursuit, production, and dissemination of knowledge. No government, regardless of which party is in power, should dictate what private universities can teach, whom they can admit and hire, and which areas of study and inquiry they can pursue. In response, the Trump administration said it will freeze $2.2 billion in grants and $60 million in contracts with the university. This afternoon, Donald Trump threatened to remove Harvard's tax-exempt status, which it has because it is an educational institution. As analysis in the New York Times says, quote, Harvard University is 140 years older than the United States. It has an endowment greater than the GDP of nearly 100 countries and has educated 8 American presidents. So if an institution was going to stand up to the Trump administration's war on academia, Harvard would be at the top of the list. Former federal judge Michael Luttig, who was on this program yesterday, praised the move by the country's oldest and most elite university, telling the New York Times this, quote, this is of momentous significance. This should be the turning point in the president's rampage against American institutions, end quote. Harvard's defiance also drew the attention of someone who doesn't speak out very often these days, former President Barack Obama, a Harvard law graduate himself, who in 1990 became the first black president of the Harvard Law Review. Former President Obama saying this, quote, Harvard has set an example for other higher ed institutions, rejecting an unlawful and ham-handed attempt to stifle academic freedom while taking concrete steps to make sure all students at Harvard can benefit from an environment of intellectual inquiry, rigorous debate, and mutual respect. Let's hope other institutions follow suit. That is where we start the hour with some of our favorite reporters and friends. New York Times writer-at-large Elizabeth Bumiller is here. Her byline is on that reporting we just read from. With me at the table, former federal prosecutor, MSNBC legal analyst Christy Greenberg is back. President of Reproductive Freedom for All, Mini Timuraju, is here at the table. And Democratic strategist and professor of practice at Columbia University, MSNBC political analyst Basil Smikle is here. Elizabeth Bumiller, take me through the tale that the Times reports today, that you write today, of Harvard's decision to resist.
Well, Harvard had the administration, the Trump administration, had threatened Harvard earlier with $9 billion in withholding the federal funding, but there was nothing very specific about it. And then this past Friday, Harvard got the letter from the Trump administration outlining basically the way the administration wanted to oversee hiring, curriculum, and other aspects of and coursework, you know, other aspects of life at Harvard, central to the institution. And at that point, Harvard pushed back. That was Monday with that very, very strong letter. Harvard had been taking some steps on its own to after it was criticized for some of the protests on campus earlier about against Israel. Harvard had not been a peaceful place, but the administration had taken some steps. But this letter was just too far for Harvard, and they pushed back and said no, thank you. And as a result, of course, Trump responded last night saying that he was going to freeze $2.2 billion in federal funding. Interestingly, he didn't say exactly what federal funds would be affected, but about $7 billion of that $9 billion that was originally threatened, $7 billion of that goes to hospitals, to the Harvard-affiliated hospitals in Boston and Cambridge, including Mass General, Boston Children's, and the Dana-Farber Cancer Center. So they're withholding funding from hospitals that the community uses, potentially.
Unbelievable. When you look at how they'll fight, it's interesting that there are some strange bedfellows here. I want to read from your story, Elizabeth. Quote, Mr. William Burke is also an outside ethics advisor to the Trump Organization and represented the law firm Paul Weiss in the deal it recently reached with the Trump administration. Mr. Robert Hur, who worked in the Justice Department in Mr. Trump's first term, was the special counsel who investigated President Joseph Biden's handling of classified documents and termed him, quote, an elderly man with a poor memory, end quote, enraging Mr. Biden. Both lawyers understand the legal workings of the current administration and an expertise of benefit to Harvard. So Harvard has reached into not just the Republican side, but the Trump side. Tell me about that.
Well, that is what you do if you want people who can argue a good case for you. They know the opposition. Obviously, I got some letters this morning and some emails from readers saying this is a clear conflict of interest in the case of William Burke. But from Harvard's point of view, this is who you want on your side. We'll see what kind of reaction there is from the Trump administration that William Burke is now representing Harvard against the White House. And the same with Robert Hur. He was in the Trump Justice Department in the first term, and certainly he's reviled by many Democrats for his description of the former President Biden. But again, he knows the workings of the Trump Justice Department.
Elizabeth, what are the stakes for Harvard?
They're big. They're huge. I mean, there's Harvard, again, $9 billion in federal funding at stake. Now, Harvard has an extremely large endowment. It's $53 billion. It's the largest in the country. It's larger than the GDP last year of Jordan, plus close to 100 other countries beneath Jordan in GDP. But Harvard, it's a potentially very big fight. We'll see how far the president takes this. He threatened Harvard's to pull Harvard's tax-exempt status this morning. He doesn't have that power. That is power that is given to Congress, and it would be a very, very tough. They would have to pass a law taking away Harvard's tax-exempt status, and it doesn't seem like it would go anywhere, at least at this point. But he can threaten. He can also. He could. There could be a lawsuit. The president and Stephen Miller, one of his most powerful aides, are said to be pleased to have this as a fight. They want to have this fight. They can, if it goes to court and is a protracted fight in court, it would be give them the platform to attack, what they see as the liberalism and elite education run amok.
Elizabeth, let me ask you one more question about Mr. Burke. You write that he was an outside ethics advisor to the Trump org, but that he represented the law firm Paul Weiss. Paul Weiss went in and did a deal. Is that the end game for Harvard, that they go in and do a deal?
I just don't know. It's a very good question. I would think not in this case, but there was a couple of sentences in that letter yesterday saying that they would wanted to talk to the administration. So that I just don't know the answer to that. Right now, it does not look like there's any deal in the offing, given the kind of demands that the White House was making on Harvard.
This has been Basil brewing. Here's President Barack Obama at Hamilton College back on April 3rd.
If you are a university, you may have to figure out, are we in fact doing things right? Have we in fact violated our own values, our own code, violated the law in some fashion? If not, and you're just being intimidated, well, you should be able to say, well, that's why we got this big endowment. You know, we'll stand up for what we believe in, and then we'll pay our researchers for a while out of that endowment, and we'll give up the extra wing or the fancy gymnasium that yeah, we can delay that for a couple of years, because, you know, academic freedom might be a little more important.
He's saying it nicely, but I think the point he's trying to make is these are fancy, cushy places for a whole lot of people, and we might have to sacrifice, and not just quote him, quote, a fancy gymnasium or an extra wing, because the very principle of academic freedom might be a little more important.
Yeah, so what Harvard did was extraordinary. And, you know I've been watching this and paying attention to it very closely, because we've been talking about this since 2023, when we were talking about Governor DeSantis and what he was doing with schools in Florida. So this has been, as you said, been brewing for quite some time. I was also concerned about the role of outside influences on university work when they fired Claudine Gay, or pushed her out, if you will. So I was excited to see what Harvard did. Now, I'm at Columbia. My undergraduate alma mater, Cornell, was, said that they were being threatened with $1 billion in a loss of funds. So however you feel about how the universities have responded before Harvard's response, it should be noted that higher education broadly is under attack. And what Harvard did is create this umbrella that hopefully, as the former president has said, that other schools can live under and say, how do we collectively push this back?